Hey everyone out there, welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. And on today's episode, I'm very excited to be talking with Christopher Golden about the House of Last Resort. Let's get that rat in shot. The
Yeah.
best cover, I have to say. I love it. Is this your favorite cover? I know you're not meant to kind of like one over the
It's
other.
so funny because uh I've been really fortunate in the last sort of 6 years or so that just really, really excellent covers. And but I've had some really bad ones. So I feel lucky every time, not for a while, but I feel lucky every time I get a cover that I can just really get excited about. And the American cover and the UK cover are so completely different for this book,
Mhm.
and I love them both for completely different reasons. I feel like the UK cover, this lovely thing that you just showed,
Mhm.
is kind of cheeky. They're just messing with you, right? And as soon as I got it, I was like, "Oh, really?" And then I looked at it and I was like, "Oh, that's a fantastic cover." It's just the rat is so disturbing. Um, and every time I post it online, the reactions are so great. It's like um, people are so grossed out by it, but immediately want it, which is the desired reaction.
Yes, it's exactly. I remember I was doing an external event with Titan. Obviously, we're sister companies, so we're in the same
Yes. Yeah.
building. And I was in the back of a Uber with three of the lovely people who work in publicity and marketing over at Titan, and they were like, "What do you think of the cover?" And I was like, "I love it. It's it's perfect." I think it was divisive at first, but then everyone fell in love with it,
Yeah.
rightly so.
Well, that's exactly. I think that is the natural response to this cover. You're
Yes.
you're just like, oh, and then you're like, no, but that's great.
Oh boy. Yes. Yeah.
Um, it is look, any any great book cover is designed to make you look closer or look twice, or
Mhm.
if you're in the physical world, actually pick it up and say, what is
Mhm.
this horrific thing? And yeah, great.
Yeah, definitely. So for anyone out there who obviously hasn't checked out the book yet, because this will be going out just before publication,
Great.
um, what can you tell us about the House of Last Resort?
So it's the story of a young American couple who are drawn to buy a home in Sicily by an offer that is real in certain towns in Italy, and I think I've been told also in Japan and a couple of other countries, but the one getting the most sort of coverage over here, the ones are usually these ones in Italy, because so often it's for, hey, we're trying to um, bring new life to this sort of half abandoned town in Sicily. And so to do that, we're offering these homes for €1. But you have to live here for 5 years. You can't rent it to somebody else, and you have to promise that you're going to spend at least €50,000 fixing it up over the course of that thing. And in a new era when so many people can work from home, this is an absolutely irresistible situation. So this young couple decide that they're going to buy a home here, partly because of all of those reasons, but also because Tommy's grandparents live in this town, in the town of Becchina. So they think this is an opportunity for a new start, but also a connection. And I loved the idea of, like, people left the old world to move to the new world
Mm.
once upon a time. And I loved the idea of moving to the new old world, if that makes sense. But of course, when they buy the house, they find that it's got a little bit more than they bargained for. It has a history that they're not aware of when they first bought it and when they move in, and that history quickly comes to involve um, evil. And I'm happy to elaborate on that, but that's the setup.
Yes, yeah. I did kind of wonder as I was reading it, like the obviously home ownership and homes are so expensive. I'm in London currently, and obviously it's very, very expensive.
Yes.
what lengths you would go to own a home. I'm not sure I could quite go this.
Well, listen, the thing is, Sicily is beautiful. I mean, I've
Yes.
been there several times. I've toured the whole island a couple of times. It is absolutely beautiful. In the summertime, it is absolutely mercilessly hot. But so are lots of places in this country, and in the summertime in your country. I mean,
Mhm.
it's uh, it's just the world now, right? So the idea of this beautiful home up on a hill, there's plenty of breeze, lots of sunshine, great food, in a town that's reinventing itself. And if you can work remotely from anywhere, to own a home for €1 is a pretty sweet deal. So I can easily, my wife and I have always talked about, if we've been together 37 years. We've been married next month, it'll be 33 years. And in our entire relationship, we've always talked about the fact that her connection to her family here was the only thing that kept us from moving to Europe 30 years ago. Because I've always wanted to do that. And, I love my family, my family here, but we have a different sort of relationship. And I think that we would have been, fine to communicate in other ways and visit and all of those things. Um, and so to me, the sort of romance of it, the excitement and the adventure of it would be a draw.
Yeah.
That would be amazing, especially when you're that age.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And there was something just really beautiful about kind of Tommy and Kate's relationship. Like, obviously, quite often when you're reading, especially obviously in horror or kind of thrillers, there's quite often a relationship breakdown, and that's kind of, at the start of the book or kind of playing out. But this is it's almost kind of, yeah, a very kind of positive, beautiful relationship, it was just wonderful to kind of read and obviously have that against all the other stuff that
I
was
really
going on.
appreciate you saying that because it was a very purposeful choice.
Mm,
I set out to, you know, 99.9% of the time in a story like this, you have that situation and the supernatural presence or the evil presence sort of preys on that element. And while they do have disagreements over the course of the story, I wanted to start with a happily married couple in a horror
mm,
story. And I um, every time it's pointed out, I love it because it is so unusual. Let's have these people. My novel Road of Bones. I set out to write a story about sort of male friendship
mhm.
and sort of the bond that's there even when you don't get along necessarily all the time. Um, and so as I'm writing novels more, the older I get, the more interested I become. And I'm only 57. I don't know. But I the more interested I become in what the sort of what the catalyst of evil does to a relationship.
Mhm.
And in this case, yeah, it was from the beginning. It was let's start with a happily married couple and have them go through this together.
Mhm. And there is obviously, we try not to spoil anything for anyone out there, but there is a particular scene with Kate and one of her husband's family members that really kind of notches everything up a bit. So when people get there, they'll know.
Yes, people will know. It's funny. I get reviews from reviewers and from readers are always really interesting. I tend to get sort of three different variations, which is on all of my books, which is there's not enough character development and the beginning it moves too fast, or there's too much character development and it moves too slow, or the people who are in the middle, which is great. But it's always so funny to me to get that. But one of the things I don't know, my style, the way I tell a story is I want you to meet these people. I want you to understand them and get to know them, so that you feel like you're part of the story. But when the story turns, um,
Yes. Yes.
it doesn't go back and I feel like that's life.
Mm.
When I don't know if I'm, but when the shit hits the fan,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
in real life, when something like that happens, it's a crisis and you have to deal with it in crisis mode, I guess.
Mhm. Yes, yeah, definitely. And it does in like a kind of perfect way. The kind of slow burn of it is something that I particularly enjoy about horror. And one of kind of my favorite books of last year was Boys in the Valley, which is obviously going to kind of touch on some of the religious elements in this book, but
Yeah.
just the slow burn of oh, these these people have been saved in a way that they've got this opportunity at a new life. And yeah,
Well, let's take a moment to say Boys in the Valley is a great horror
my
novel,
God, yes.
and really Philip's breakthrough. You know, he's been doing great work for a while, but that book really notched things up, and it's really good. But yeah, I mean, I just feel like I talk a lot of the time about religion. It's one of the things when you're a kid they teach you not to talk about, right? It's weird because it's divisive, but I've been sort of writing about if you're writing supernatural horror, you end up writing about religion and spirituality and faith and belief and all this kind of stuff, which is sort of ironic because I refer to myself as a Christian atheist, which means that I don't believe that there's a God of any kind. But I was raised in the Catholic Church, and I believe in the moral guidance of the
Mhm.
sort of way that you're supposed to treat people that I was taught in the 1970s, right? And but it's really interesting to me because I feel like um, anything we value in this world, we're afraid of losing. We're afraid of that, and the kinds of things that stories about evil and corruption and all of that stuff threatens. That makes you. I'm not saying this well, but it makes you value the things that are important to you more if you can feel that fear, right?
Yes,
And I think that's
yes.
the great thing about a supernatural horror story is it broadens your mind. It makes you cherish or care for the things you cherish more. I don't know. Maybe I'm making too much of it, but that's what I've always felt about horror.
Mm. And there's the element, like you were saying before, about I suppose kind of losing things, and there's the whole thing in the book about them even kind of, I suppose, putting importance on wealth and the objects that they have collected, and then having to kind of get rid of those things and really kind of pare back, which is just a really kind of interesting look at, yeah, what's the most important thing in life in this book. And it's obviously the friendships, the relationships, the trying to get back to your family. uh yeah.
Right. And also I feel like they're searching for a kind of peace.
Yes.
They're that's what they're looking for. And uh they initially find it, but it doesn't stay that way. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. We have to also touch on the kind of, I suppose, the many kind of layers of the book. So we're obviously kind of dealing with the grief and loss, but we're also kind of, I suppose, looking at the idea of other kind of, I suppose, human evils like capitalism and, you know, the even the xenophobia of kind of the ideas of the imports of people coming into the country who are not kind of from that country. So kind of how important was that to, yeah, cover those ideas of more human evil than
Yeah, it's
supernatural?
a layer. I always include human evil in a story, partly because I'm so passionate about it in real life. But I feel like it's more a question of some of the ways that we talk about certain things. So I have been asked about elements in this book of gentrification, right? And gentrification is a massive problem in so many places in the world, but especially here. But I know it's a massive problem elsewhere. But interestingly, I think that sort of this is the one time, the one way in which gentrification can actually be good, because these towns, these real life towns, are abandoned and crumbling. The young people who are born there leave as soon as they are able. They're basically ghost towns, and the way that the authorities, who are the elders who still live in that town, have decided to solve that problem is to invite people from around the world to come and live here and build a new community. And so the idea of coming in and having ideas for tourism, ideas for new businesses, ideas for investments and things like that, in this case, is what gentrification or those mechanisms are good for. But still, you are going to have people who are not happy with the influx of new investments and new ideas and change, and that's only natural. And it is especially this sort of clash of new world, old world ideas. There's also, we could go into the whole idea of, if you're coming to a new place with money, people are more than happy to let you in. And if you're coming to a new place in need, then the walls go up. And that's an interesting conversation to have. It's sort of an underlying element of the story. I did read there's a town in Sicily called Sambuca di Sicilia, that is the most successful at doing what they're doing in the novel. And they've had $125 million in new business investment in the last 5 years. And what's happening there is incredible, to the point where, and this is what I love about the reversing of the old world, new world dynamic. All over the world, you have little Italies and Chinatowns and all this stuff. And in Sambuca di Sicilia, there's a neighborhood that's actually called Little America. And I just find that fascinating. I find it really interesting.
Yes, yeah, it's very interesting as well how that can change over the years. Like there was always kind of, especially in London, little pockets that were kind of, all the kind of Australians will live in this particular part of London, and then that kind of moves on. And sometimes, obviously, depending on whether areas are being kind of built up, and obviously money's coming into the area, and so the average person can't necessarily afford to live there anymore, so they kind of move on. But I just remember this very kind of rowdy Australian bar that used to be kind of down the road from where I live in Shepherd's Bush, and it's not there anymore. So I think the Aussies have gone to a different part of London now.
Elsewhere. Yeah.
Yes.
No, I find the whole thing just really interesting. And and I also think that who's there does impact. There's a lot of Vatican church, Christian Catholicism. It's no secret because it's on the cover of the book. There's an exorcism element to the story that really plays into everything that happens and when it gets really nasty. And I think that anytime you're writing a story about Italy, a horror story about Italy, the church has got to come in there somewhere. And that's another new world, old world conversation,
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose the added thing of the language barrier, because you obviously have scenes of Tommy and Kate, and that obviously they've tried to learn some Italian and try to get more conversational, but I suppose it's very different when you're learning, on Duolingo to actually living in another country. So
well, let's say it outright. I mean, I'm not speaking for people from the United Kingdom. Americans are so lazy about language. And so the attitude of privilege that I think most native English speakers, but certainly especially Americans, have about language is appalling and driven home anytime you travel someplace where English is not the first language. And it's always fascinating to me how some places you go, they a lot of people speak English and they're happy to have you there and they are happy to speak English to you. But there are a lot of places where they're just like, you lazy, like, I'm not going to even try to speak any English to you. Good luck. And
Mhm.
honestly, I totally respect that attitude because,
Yes.
um, and in hill towns in Sicily, especially where most of the younger people have left, you're going to mostly find people who either don't speak English or they speak a little bit of English, um, and more power to them. Like so Tommy and Kate go in and they've tried to learn some Italian and they've learned some, but they've been a
Mhm.
little bit lazy about it because of that. But they know that they're immersing themselves. When my mother-in-law came to this country at 13 years old, she spoke no English.
Mhm.
And they put her in a classroom uh, where they spoke no Italian. And again, she spoke a Sicilian dialect at that time.
Mhm.
So it was just like, here you go, good luck. Um, I just find the whole thing, it's all just really interesting to me.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I think there is something about, I suppose there's a certain romantic element as well about certain languages, and I think Italian is one of them, that it sounds beautiful when it's spoken correctly.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But
my
language is,
my yeah.
first of all, I want to say I'm glad we're having this conversation because obviously I love to talk about all the horror and the gore and the evil and the exorcisms and demons and things, but I also find all of this stuff really interesting and it does inform the process of writing a book like this, creating
Mm.
characters like this. Um, but I just the first time we went to Sicily, so my wife's parents moved many decades ago to this country, like 60 years ago, something like that. And uh, when we went over there, my wife and her sisters grew up speaking English, but also speaking the sort of Sicilian dialect in the house as well. But by that time, Sicily had fully immersed itself in the national Italian language. So that if they would go there and they would speak the Sicilian dialect in their parents' hometown, the people there would like look down on them like you're rednecks, basically. You're a bunch of hillbillies to speak this old dialect. And I find language and our attitudes toward other languages fascinating.
Yes, yeah, it is. It's very, very interesting because you would hope that communication, I suppose, is the biggest thing that we have, and obviously in a lot of the horror novels, horror films, and stuff that we watch and enjoy, there's always that element of, that they can at least communicate that they don't feel safe, and let's let's run upstairs in the building or whatever it may be. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, to have that kind of barrier where you can't communicate is actually quite frightening. So
Well, the other thing on that note that I play on in the book so much is family secrets and how secretive so many
yes.
families are. They don't
Mm.
talk about the things in the family history that they don't want to, that make them uncomfortable or that they find, whatever. My family was like that. My wife's family is like that. It's so as you get older, you find out all these things. It's like, what do you mean this happened? Um, anyway, I have a million of those stories, but we won't go there. But I loved that element of this too, especially because you're coming to a new country where they don't speak the same language as you. This is your family, most of whom you've only met like once or twice, and they have this whole shared history that you don't share, that you don't know about, and they know things about you that you don't even know,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And it's so there's a lot of families. There are a lot of family secrets in this story as well.
Mhm. It definitely feels a very generational thing. I know, kind of just thinking back to my parents to a degree, but also my grandparents, my grampy when he was still alive was had served in World War II and never spoke about it. It was one of those, you couldn't bring it up, you couldn't mention it in passing. It was just one of those things that had obviously happened, but was never up for discussion.
Right.
And it's just so interesting to think that these huge things happened in people's lives, but I don't, whether those demons were ever fought. Yeah,
Yeah.
very,
No,
very
it's
interesting.
fascinating to me.
Definitely.
I had
So
just as an aside
yes,
based on
carry
that,
on.
and then we'll rush on. But um, one of my friends in high school, his dad had served in the Vietnam War, and I was doing a project in school for it, and his dad agreed to talk to me about the war, even though he'd never spoken a word about it to either of his kids, both of whom were my contemporaries, before then or after. So he talked to me about it because I had specific questions for this project, but he didn't talk about it around the house or at his work, and he never spoke about it to his kids. Really fascinating. Anyway.
It's crazy. It's almost like, oh, you know, you can talk to a third party and maybe feel as if you can say things that you wouldn't necessarily maybe say to family members, which again,
you can
you
have
know,
a little bit more distance from it, I suppose.
yes, yeah, definitely. So we touched on the kind of the rat, but let's touch on, because you're quite a fan of like monsters in general, aren't you?
Of course, yeah.
Of course. Um, and I think now is like a good time to bring in, obviously you've written in so many different universes as well. So in particular, and obviously with Romulus just coming out, writing kind of in the Alien universe, like how did that come about? And yeah, would you want to do more?
Yeah, of course. It's such a great, the movies are really uneven. I did love Romulus. There were a couple things about it I really didn't like, but overall I loved it, and I thought it was just beautifully executed. That came about because I was standing in at a party at World Fantasy Convention in Canada, with my friend James A. Moore, who sadly passed away earlier this year, and Steve Saffel, who was at that time an editor at Titan. And Steve and I had known each other for quite some time, and he mentioned to me that he'd that Titan had gotten the license to do Alien novels, and that they'd had these 3 books that they wanted to do, that they'd had sort of ideas from Fox about. And I said, well, automatically off the bat, because I love the property, I said, well, I know you've been wanting to do some work with Tim Levin, who at the time hadn't been a Titan author, but Stephen wanted to work with him. And by the way, one of the most brilliant horror writers there is. One of my best friends, but I'm just such a huge fan of his work. So I guess he's announcing his new one soon, so I can't say anything about it, but he's amazing. Anyway, I said, I know you've been wanting to work with Tim, and I know you want to work with Jim, who's right here. I said, we are all represented by the same agent. So why don't we just make a deal for all 3 books, and we'll each write one. And Steve was intrigued by that idea, and that led to a deal being made for it. And as the person who sort of put it together, I got my pick of the 3 opportunities, and the one I chose to do was the one that was the prequel to Aliens, because Aliens is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. I've seen it so many times, and I particularly like the director's cut, the extended edition of it. And so it was a huge opportunity to write the story of what happens prior to Ripley's arrival on LV-426.
It's so I saw Romulus as well, and I would agree. I enjoyed, there was some amazing action scenes, and it had that claustrophobic nature that obviously the earlier films had.
Yes.
But yeah, there was a couple of, I suppose maybe some of the callbacks felt a little bit on the nose.
Without spoiling it for anybody, there's one bit of dialogue that I didn't really mind the sort of the thematic or choreographic callbacks and things like that, but that one bit of dialogue, and I know you know what I'm talking about, is so out of place. The character who says it completely would never say it, and it's so obviously nudge nudge wink wink, fourth wall breaking, that I really felt like it might as well have been in Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yes.
But other than that, I loved it. And there are things in this movie that are the floating acid scene is amazing. We won't go,
Yeah. Very cool.
But yeah, I loved it, and I'm a huge fan, and getting to do some digging into that world is great. Many years ago, I pitched, like, God, in the 90s, I pitched a couple of different Alien comic book ideas to Dark Horse and was summarily dismissed. Um, but I just would like to see more of the universe, you know. Um, and I'm super excited about the new TV show. I hope that they do it
Yes.
well.
It looks amazing from the trailer. So yeah, fingers crossed. And I don't know if you've probably seen, but the latest kind of run of Alien comics are like Alien versus Avengers.
Uh, has it come out already?
Yeah. I so
Okay.
I sit like opposite the comics guy at work. So I was
Yeah.
just like reading through the comics boxes and I was just like, oh my God, there's a whole thing with like Venom and a face hugger and stuff. It's quite cool. It's
Yeah.
definitely
No,
worth
no,
checking
I
out.
think I don't think they've offered the collection yet. I'll probably get the collection because I think that
Yes.
I mean, it's such a natural idea.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it's really cool. Um, I also just feel like I don't know, there's so much of that to explore. Um,
Mhm.
it's sort of this weird thing. We were talking about how families have these secrets and these topics that they
Yes.
don't discuss, and they
Mhm.
sort of work around the edges of those things. And I feel like there are so many things I would like to see happen in the Alien universe that are like
Yes.
that.
Mhm.
Like, when are we going to address this, thing? So we'll see.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And some of the novelizations that have come out recently, like the Castro's one, was just amazing to kind of read that story. Like
Yeah,
it was just great,
yeah. No,
great to see. So
she's really talented. In fact, I don't remember how it happened, but she had reached out to me to say, I've always wanted to write an alien novel. I want to do this story. And I was like, well, and so I actually messaged Steve Sappel, who was still the Alien editor at the time, and said, you need to talk to the Castro. And it worked out, and I'm so glad it did. She and then I was so happy to see Mary Sangiovanni do
mhm.
hers. Uh, again, I think there's a lot to be done.
Yeah,
They just have to,
definitely.
unleash the hordes of writers who want to work in that world.
Yeah, I think there's a few. We did a Christmas special on FPTV last year with Tim and with Ali Wilkes, and it was a lot of fun. And we were talking about other universes that people would like to write within, and we were saying how Event Horizon would be quite a cool universe to write in as well. Is
Well,
is there any universes you would love to write in that you haven't?
that's a good question. I'm sure there are lots. I mean, it's funny because I've written in so many of them at this point that I
Mm.
think it would have to be something really special to make me want to do that. I do feel like I've always wanted to write a novel set in the 1970s Marvel horror comics universe,
Okay, yeah,
like
yeah.
a period piece
Mhm.
with that. Um, and I don't know. That's a good question. Blade Runner, uh,
Yes.
my favorite movie of all time, and has been since it came out.
Mhm.
Um, I was 15, I think, when it came out, and it's been my favorite movie since then. Yeah, I have to think about it. There are a lot of weird horror movies that I'd be like, I would like to write something set in that world.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Yes, yeah. There's still so much, like you said before, obviously so much left unexplored in Alien, but also in so many other universes. So
yeah, I'd like to write a
yes.
sequel to John Carpenter's The Thing.
Oh,
Now
yes.
I know
Oh my
that
God.
it's based on a classic short story by John W. Campbell called Who Goes
Mhm.
There, which is phenomenal in its own right. But I want to write a sequel about McCready and all of that stuff. So yeah,
Yes. Oh my God. And even the slightly schlocky game that came out was for the thing was also amazing. So
yeah.
yes.
King Kong.
Yes. Oh,
Like
yes.
this is, I'm just
Ah.
weird stuff. I
Yeah.
also like I love Golden Age Hollywood movies from like the 30s and 40s.
Mhm.
So, Casablanca, there are a lot of like The
Yeah.
Thin Man, like stuff like that I love. I just, yeah, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, yeah, so much to do, so much left to
Yeah.
do. Um, so we have to like also kind of touch on, and it's something that's been like really interesting over probably the last kind of 18 months, maybe kind of 2 years or so. Kind of, I suppose some people are calling it the renaissance of horror, the kind of the breadth of horror that's now available, both with kind of new horror imprints like Orbit's horror imprint that's launching next year,
Yes.
um, as well as kind of things like Shudder, remakes of, Resident Evil and Silent Hill games. Um, why, in your opinion, does horror endure?
Well, that's a separate question, right? Why does art endure? Because it is one of the most important and vital ways for us to our process in a safe way, uh, our trauma, our emotions, um, the horror that's happening in the world at any given moment. So I think horror endures because we need it. We need it in the same way we need comedy. We need to laugh, but we also need to have that the moment after you're terrified where you can go, oh, the movie's over, you can get up, or you can pause something to go pee, or you can close the book. And I feel like you need that exhale as part of the way that you process things. But as far as the renaissance of horror, I did the keynote speech. I was guest of honor at the British Fantasy weekend a number of years ago, and at the time, horror in the U.S., particularly in the media, was not in a great place.
Mm.
Um, and I was talking about why I felt at the time that British horror was so much more vital in what was coming out, and I think it was because when the horror wave that started with Stephen King's rise to prominence
Mhm.
and eventually crashed in the about 1990, 1993, thereabouts.
Mhm.
Um, it crashed because the public's view of what horror was had been polluted by, horror movies that we love, but are just not very good, right? There was a lot of crap. And what happened was that um, horror in book form became so popular so fast, and editors and publishers wanted to put more and more out there because they knew the market was there, that they ended up flooding the market with a whole bunch of crap that was not well written, or not even written by people who cared about horror. They were written by people who thought, well, I can make some money right now because this is hot. And fair enough, as a writer, you have to go where the money is. If you're trying if you rely on your work to eat,
Yeah.
then you need to do what you need to do. Um, but I do think that's what led to that crash at that time. And I think that we're in the position we're in now, finally, with this renaissance that's been building up slowly for about, really, I think it started with Joe Hill's rise or
Mhm.
ascension and then Paul Tremblay. And then now we have this very different environment. And what's wonderful about it is that horror never went away. It remained vital in the small press. It remained vital with horror infiltrating other genres. Um, and as part of that process, horror became a much more inclusive genre. It became a much more inclusive genre um, in a way that's much more obvious and embracing than other genres have done. So if you look at science fiction and fantasy, mystery's there now, which is great. Mystery and thrillers are there now, which are great. Um, it's been, I think, harder for those genres to become as diversified as horror has become. And now we have a horror market that, if you like to be scared, if you like a horror story, if you like the emotional complexities of a horror story, but you want to see yourself in that story, there are books for you. And I think that is fantastic. I mean, it's just incredible to me that what horror has been able to become. And horror is a more sophisticated genre now than it ever was. There's, for years, Hollywood talked about elevated horror, but we've been doing elevated horror for a long time. But now, when the floodgates opened and editors and publishers said, and like Orbit's starting a new horror line, and there's another one that's starting up. But when these floodgates are opening now, instead of having a whole bunch of writers who either aren't very good or who don't really care about horror, you have an entire generation of diverse writers who love it, who are passionate about it, who are really talented writers. So now when the audience goes and they're trying to gobble up as much horror as they can get, they're having different stories, different experiences, well-written books. And so they're being rewarded for that love instead of going, maybe I don't like this as much as I thought I did, because they're reading stuff that isn't good. And so I think we're living in the best time for horror. Like, this truly is the golden age of horror right now. And I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that I stuck around long enough to take part in it.
You can always tell as well when I suppose the mainstream, so I suppose say Waterstones, for example, in the UK, that they're now starting to bring back horror sections because they pretty much took them away for many years. So it's just like, I like some healthy competition.
Yes. I mean, that happened a number of years ago here with Barnes and Noble. There had been no horror section for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden, independent stores started to do it.
Yes.
And then Barnes and Noble stores started to go, oh, all of this stuff is selling. We should remind people that this is horror and this is horror. And, it's just great. I mean, I love being able to walk into a bookstore and see a horror. And look, I read all kinds of stuff. I mean, I probably read as much crime fiction as I read horror. But horror is where my heart is, that's where my, it's what I always have gravitated toward. So.
And out of all the horror books, films, everything that you've kind of consumed over the years, is there anything that's particularly stuck with you that's just been your terrifying kryptonite?
I mean, so many. Look, it's very hard to scare someone like me. Particularly with words on a page. But even in a movie theater, it's very hard to scare me. My good friend Tony Tremblay, he and my friend John McElveen and I always go to the horror movies together. And one of the reasons I love, they both write horror stories as well, but one of the reasons I love going with Tony is because he still gets the crap scared out of him. He jumps a mile constantly on the edge of his seat. And it's a beautiful thing to enjoy that with him, because it's more fun when he's with you. But when you're sitting reading a book, you don't have Tony sitting next to you typically. And so it's really hard to do that. I have so many from my youth, from my college days, all that stuff that do. The one book that I always tell people when they say, like, what book has scared you the most as an adult? Because to me, when you're reading a horror story, it's about being unnerved, unsettled. Like something that really kind of creeps under your skin. It's very hard to do. There's a novel by Ramsey Campbell called The Grin of the Dark that really, I still remember what it felt like to read that book. And that's a hard thing to do. There are lots of horror novels that I like, that I admire, that I think are creepy, just really beautifully executed. Last year, I think, or was it this year, Gwendolyn Kai's novel, The Haunting of Velkwood, came out. Yes. Excellent book. Was I scared? No. Right? It's very hard to do. And I'm not sure that it was really about scaring me. And that's okay, because I often don't think about scaring people when I'm writing. It's not my top priority. But The Grin of the Dark by Ramsey Campbell, if you, it's a very smart, very unnerving horror novel, and I love it, and I recommend it highly.
So the crazy thing about The Grin of the Dark, so we have Ramsey coming onto the channel next month. I'm going up to Liverpool to go have a cup of tea and chat horror for the afternoon, which is just the perfect afternoon. The Grin of the Dark is now out of print in the UK, so you you cannot buy it.
Well, I think Titan
Which
should put
is,
it back in print.
this is the thing. This is our pledge to that
Yes.
it I thought it was one of those books I've been meaning to read for many years. So I was just like, oh, I'll check it out now that we have Ramsey coming on. And then it was just like, oh no, it's out of print.
Yeah.
So
I
crazy.
literally just bought, I never do this, but I hardly ever read anything again. I did obviously when I was younger all the time. But I think, I mean, other than The Stand,
Mm.
I almost never read anything a second time. Uh, but I bought a second copy because I didn't want to go dig for my first copy, um, you know, so that I could read it a second time, which I'm going to do probably in October.
Good choice. Very good choice. I'm going to track it down and I will talk
Yes,
to Titan.
yes, you should. It's. I would be happy to write an introduction if that would be something that would appeal to them. Yeah.
Yay. So to finish off
By
the
the way, let me say,
yes.
just in case somebody watching this is thinking, how dare he think that he could write an introduction to the legend that is Ramsey Campbell? I agree with you. I'm just saying I love the book, but Ramsey is on, well, we would say here the Mount Rushmore of horror, but yes. Anyway, continue.
There can be it's not like the Highlander. There's multiple
Yes, I know, but yeah,
amazing,
yeah,
but he's definitely, I'd say, the English godfather of
yes, for
horror.
sure.
Definitely. Yes, so to finish off the interview today, so always the kind of the last two questions. What are you working on next? And then some recommendations. So yeah, first question, what are you working on next?
Well, I'm writing a bunch of new comics that can I talk about? I'm writing the second volume of Mortal Terror, which is my
Okay.
original comic book series with Tim Levin for Dark Horse Comics. Tom Stogowski and I are writing. Most of these things haven't been announced, but obviously everybody knows we're doing it. Tom Stogowski and I are writing the second volume of Frankenstein New World for Dark Horse. Um, let's see. I'm writing more Hellboy in Love. So all of that comic stuff and other more Lady Baltimore. Like it's been there's a lot of new comics coming now that I finished my new novel, which is called The Nightbirds, which will be out in the U.S. in May. And I'm not sure when it will be out in the UK. Hopefully, we will get that sorted out soon. Um, and yeah, that's what's going on. As far as recommendations, boy, I mentioned the Haunting of Velkwood by Gwendolyn Keist. Let's see, what else have I? The thing is, like the Reformatory by Tina Review. I'm sure everybody has
Yes.
read that by now, but
Mm.
it's winning every award, and as it should. Lone Women by Victor Laval. Obviously, everybody's reading that. It's amazing. I'm just trying to think. Like, I also read, like, as I said, a lot of crime. So like S.A. Cosby is.
Yes.
Uh, I got a chance to meet him a couple months ago. What a pleasure to finally meet him. I'm such a huge fan of what he does. As far as watching, I am currently doing the thing that everyone in this country seems to be doing right now, which is watching Evil.
Okay.
And it's funny and really unsettling and really excellent. So I don't know what it's streaming on there, but I highly recommend it. I think the first 4 or 5 episodes, it sort of is getting its footing, but once it sort of starts to lay its cards on the table, um, it's really good. It's very difficult to do horror well um, in that sort of episodic TV structure, and
Mm.
it's excellent. So yeah, that's probably the one at the moment.
Yeah, I just nearly finished the newest season of Them, which is the in the new season it's like late 80s, early 90s. It's
Okay.
a black detective, and obviously the police force is still like not very happy that there is a
Yeah.
female black detective that they're having to kind of report into. And yes, scary shit starts going down when she finds out
Okay.
she's, you know, not who she thought she was. So
I
it's
haven't watched that show yet, so
terrifying.
I'll put that on the list for next. Oh, also, I did just see in the movies, I saw Cuckoo, which
Oh, yes.
I loved. I mean,
Okay.
it's really weird and unsettling, very off kilter, in a
Mm.
wonderful way. Great acting. So I highly recommend that. If you're weird like me, you'll like it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, yeah, I like weird shit. That's why we do what we do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for joining me today. And obviously, you've done a ton of book plates, which are literally on my desk at
Excellent.
work,
Thank you.
ready to be inserted into many copies of this the wonderful
Yes.
rat book.
The the House of Last
The
Resort.
House of Last Resort, and we'll have a stack at Comic-Con next month as well. So people, you know, if they haven't been able to see you or get a personal signed copy, they'll be able to get a lovely book plated edition from us. So thank you so much for signing all those book plates
Thank
for
you.
us.
My pleasure. I appreciate it. Um, if it makes readers happy, it makes me happy.
But brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I'll hopefully see you soon.
I hope so.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.